Thank you so much. Welcome everyone today. Finally good to see you all in person again after such tough times. My name is Daniel Keller. I'm from the UXD department from Luxoft. And today we're going to talk on how to make the EV revolution more accessible with good UIUX. Now your first question might be already, is it a revolution or is it an evolution? And here my answer is, if you take an existing car, combustion engine car, you rip out the engine and everything that's not needed and put in batteries and electric motor, then it's an evolution. If you design the electric vehicle from ground up with everything, then it's a revolution. And a lot of OEMs, they still think it's good enough to just replace everything, especially when it comes to the software. And today I want to show you why we should think differently here. I drive since more than 3 years fully electric. My parents drive since 2 years fully electric, and I have a lot of experience with researching and benchmarking with different EVs, and also friends and colleagues have already switched. So I have a broad overview about different types of cars, sizes, different price ranges. And I have 7 years of experience in UIUX, specialized in automotive. Why is this talk even necessary? So for the last 4 HMI conferences here, I talked to people and I noticed that people just don't have EVs in the radar in terms of software. They just think, we have an instrument cluster, we replace the fuel information with battery and it's fine. But that's not a good user experience. What is the current state on the market? So on the market, right now we have many different shared platforms like combustion engine cars, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, fully electric vehicles. And from a platform point of view, we don't want to talk too much about it today because we want to talk about software. But this platform thing is happening in the software as well, that you take the same software for different types of vehicles, which of course saves time and saves also cost. But it brings a lot of compromises. And those compromises we are nowadays aware in terms of hardware, like that the car has not as much space as it could be, or that it's not as efficient as it could be. But in the software, many people are not aware of all of those problems. So today I want to show you many real-world examples. Here's the first one. It's already 2 years old, but it's a funny one. This is from the Audi Itron, a fully electric car. And after a while, it showed the message to the users that you should go for oil change and inspection, even though this was not required in this cycle. This is a funny one. This is not super serious, but here you can already see the remainders of the old software there and how hard it is to make the perfect experience work, basically, if you try to integrate it after the fact. But this was a funny one. So this is the more serious one. All those are basically error messages where you can see they are just, the mindset is converted from a combustion engine vehicle. But in your head, you need to make a paradigm shift, because charging the car works completely different instead of filling up the car with gas. What do I mean with that? So if you have a combustion engine car, you drive every day, it's full, and then you drive for a week and maybe 1.5 weeks. At some point it gets empty, maybe you get a message, and then you're like, okay, tomorrow I fuel up. Then you forget about it, you forget again about it, and then you get a bigger message, and then you're like, okay, now I have to go to the fuel station. You do that, your life is fine. If you apply the same mindset to the EV, it's too late, and the user will have annoyance, because if this message pops up, this is too late. I'm not saying that we should remove those messages, because we still need them, but those messages the users should never see. We should support the user way earlier. How could we support them, for example? Every time when the user drives somewhere, regardless if it's in the office, to work, to the gym, to shopping, the car knows where the person is driving, and if it knows there is a charging station within reach of 50 meters, 100 meters, whatever the user wants, the car could suggest, hey, here's a free charging spot, you can go there, to support earlier. Because it doesn't take time to charge the electric vehicle. You just plug it in and you go away. And like this, you always have a full battery and you never get there. And countries like Norway show this already, that it's completely possible also from the charging infrastructure. And actually the charging infrastructure in Germany is already also way better than many people think. As I said, we should not remove these messages, but we should make sure that the user never gets to those messages. But if we make those messages, please at least make them smart, because that's why I also included the Tesla message on the bottom left. The top left one is just a stupid message, let's call it. So the battery has 1% left, and it says, hey, please go charge. But at this point, there might be no charging station in reach. It might be occupied. It might be too expensive. It might be slow, whatever. At least the car should know when there is no charging stations in reach anymore. And Tesla is a good example. So the car at any time scans where is the charging station, and when it notices, oh, the range is getting low and you are out of range of all the remaining charging stations, shortly before this, it will give you a warning and say, hey, do you want to really keep driving? And if the user has a other opportunity to charge that the car doesn't know about, you can just click away the message. But at least you never get into this area where you just don't know what to do anymore. And this paradigm shift in the head needs to happen for everyone, for the designers, for the developers, for the users. Another example is a more personal story. While I tell this story, I also have a forum post up here that you maybe can read. But basically, as I said, my parents drive since 2 years fully electric. They drive electric Corsa, Opel Corsa. And after 1 week or 2 weeks of using, my dad called me and was like, hey, I cannot find the percentage value of the battery. Where is it? And I thought it's a user error. And I was like, yeah, I'm looking into it. I make some research. And when we meet next time, I will find the setting. Sadly, I couldn't find the setting. There was no setting. There was no percentage anywhere. And this is exactly what this user is saying. So basically, this user from this forum post is saying, the only way I can tell how much percentage I have left in my battery is through the app. But you're not using the app while driving. And he says he can see the remaining range in kilometers, but this is rubbish. It's his words. And I explain you in a second why this value is rubbish. We still need this value, but it should be not the only value in the vehicle. Let's look at the instrument cluster. And this is exactly this conversion from combustion engine to instrument cluster. So on the bottom right, we have this kilometer value. The user says this is rubbish. We definitely need this value still, but why the user thinks this is rubbish? Right now it says 220 kilometers. If you now drive for 3 or 4 kilometers uphill, this value will drop to 140 or 150 kilometers so fast, because it refreshes all the time, and it's very dependent on outside factors. And this has exactly the opposite effect that it should have. Like those values, those displays, they should improve the range anxiety that users don't have that. But if it suddenly drops so fast, it actually brings in range anxiety, so it has the opposite effect. Another one is we have this graphical representation instead of a percentage display. So you might think, oh, that's cool. But look at it closely. It's not 10 bars with 10% each. It's 8 bars with 12.5% each. So it's super confusing to the user because you always think, oh, I still have over 90%, or it's really hard to glance really quickly. What I want to say is you need all three of them. You need a percentage value that you just can read. You need an easy, glanceable visual representation, and you need a kilometer value that's properly calculated. And with all of this, the user can figure out and has way less range anxiety. But you might be surprised, there's many cars on the market that have exactly the same. This is another forum post that I then found about all of this stuff. It's about the EGolf. It's a discontinued car. It's, of course, replaced by the ID.3. But here you can also see it's a complete overload of information. But the most important one, the percentage value of the battery, you don't see. You just have a small scale in the bottom left corner, which was earlier probably a fuel gauge, and it's now a battery value. I want to make an analogy with smartphones so that it gets even clearer. Imagine the smartphones would show, instead of the percentage, your remaining battery like this. This is exactly the same thing that's happening in electric vehicles. And this information might be actually even useful, but it should be not the only way how your smartphone is telling you how much energy you still have. Because what happens is, if I now open the camera app, this 1 day and 13 hours will drop to 30 minutes. So it's additional information, but it should be not the only one. And you would be surprised how many electric vehicles are on the market right now that don't show you percentage, which is crazy. But this was just a small example. An electric vehicle has so many new features and possibilities where we have to either think differently, or those features were not possible at all with a combustion engine car, or they work differently. And all those features, we help benchmarking and creating the system. But today we don't have the time to talk about all of them, but we have to talk about the most important one, the charge stop planning. Because this is the most important feature for EV users, and more than 50% of the vehicles that are released right now in the market either don't have this feature, or it's so bad that it's not usable, and it's really a feature that every single EV driver needs. What do I mean with this feature? I categorized it in 3 levels. This is not an official definition or something like with autonomous driving. This is a definition for myself for easier understanding. Level 0 is the car can do no planning at all. That means the HMI is not able to know you will not reach your destination. For example, the Opel Corsa E is one of those vehicles. So you drive, you type in a destination that's 500 kilometers away. The car just says, yeah, drive. And you need to know that the range will be not enough and need to find the charging stations by yourself. And usually the navigation system does not have all of them or is not reliable enough that you have to use your smartphone and plan it in advance on the sofa or whatever. And having fun when something with your plan changes and you have to try somewhere else, because then you have to stop somewhere, take out the smartphone and plan it. Level 1 is suggestions. So the HMI actually knows that the range will be not enough, but it only can give suggestions. It cannot make the automatic planning. And here I brought a video, for example, how this is happening. So this is a video from Nextmove. This is the biggest electric car rental company in Germany, and they do long-term rentals so that people can try electric cars. And they have basically every single electric car on the market, and they have all this experience with their users because they are first-time users. And in this video, the user is navigating from Leipzig to Flensburg, and the car actually does not have, knows it does not have enough range, it will not make it. By the way, this is an Ioniq 5, so a really new electric car. It gives you the option, search for charging stations, charging station. So you press this button, and now it gives you some recommendation. But all the recommendations are close to you, so 1.3 kilometers, 4.2. This is completely useless because the car right now, if we swipe over to the instrument cluster, we have 95% battery. So we will drive for the next 3 to 4 hours before we even have to charge. So this system is completely not usable for the user, and you again have to pull out your smartphone. And this is not a cheap electric vehicle or an old electric vehicle. This is a new one. And it's not about Hyundai, it's about everyone. It's almost in every single vehicle. There's only very rare exceptions of OEMs which do a good job right now. Level 2 is automatic planning. So what this means, user types in the destination and the navigation plans everything with charging stops accordingly. Good examples here is, for example, Daimler with the MBUX. They do a good job. Also, the Polestar does a decent job. And of course, Tesla has perfected that. But even Tesla is not at the point where we should be, and that's level 3. And that's what I call fully automatic charging stop planning, including options like food stops, shopping, hotels, all with fully automatic payment, with the car and plug and charge at every provider, but with the options of customization for expert users if they want to change something. What do I mean with the expert users? So we have 2 types of users. The user on the left side, user 1, I call the Apple user. So it just works. This user wants to just type in the destination, and the car does everything automatically, and it's just one button press, basically. This is the Apple design philosophy because they say how it's done, and for 70–80% of the user, it actually works. But user 2 is more like the Android type of user that wants a little bit more customization. But with all those customization options, you don't want to bother user 1. So it should be done, and I'm going to show you in a second how it should be done. Just type in the destination, but if you want to customize it, you can. And customization settings could be you want certain charging providers because they have a cheap price for you. You can pick between the shortest time of arrival or the cheapest time of arrival, options for food, or your departure or arrival state of charge. You can set different settings in case you cannot charge at your destination. But how is it done? So here I brought a screen recording from an external app. It's called the Better Route Planner. I have to say, I or Luxoft, we have no connection to this. It's just to show how it could be done, and this is basically in a browser recording. And this was in the early days how people planned with their smartphone their routes. But what I'm showing here is just an example. This should be integrated, or a system like this, in every EV natively in the navigation system of the OEM. So what we have to do, because we are not sitting in the car, we actually have to select the electric vehicle. So for this case, I just chose the Volkswagen ID3. And in the vehicle, you only have to type in the destination, but in our case, we have to set where we are. So we go from Stuttgart to Berlin, Brandenburger Tor, which is more range than the ID3 has, of course. So we type this in, and in the vehicle, of course, we only have to type in the destination and press this button, and now it calculates for a few seconds. This is, by the way, real time. And now on the right, it shows us a beautiful representation from Stuttgart to Berlin with the 2 charging stops, 15 and 28 minutes each. And on the left side, you see a very nice list where we have to stop, from which to where we have to charge, and the total time, 6 hours, 21 minutes, which you might be surprised how little time that is from Stuttgart to Berlin, including charging. But for the expert users, we might not start with 90% battery, but with 100% battery, so we can set that. Or instead of arriving with 10% on the destination at the hotel, we cannot charge maybe there. We want to arrive with 30% so that we can leave again. But the charges in between, we might be fine with 5% because the lower the battery, the faster we charge. So I changed now a few settings. and press calculate again, and you might be surprised. The route will look exactly the same, and also the charging stations look exactly the same, but it's two completely different charging stations on the route, because now two other ones are the most optimal to charge at, because here the setting is for the shortest time of arrival. It's 5 hours and 38 minutes of driving and 45 minutes of charging. This is without traffic, because traffic would mess the whole thing up for the representation, so you can put in traffic there, but that's for every car the same, of course. But this is how it should the user experience be in every single vehicle for every OEM. And sadly, I have to say that there is not a lot of electric vehicles on the market right now that do route planning. And now you might say, which car do we even need route planning? Only the long-distance cars, right? The ones with the big battery, because you won't drive long distance with an e-up or ID3 or whatever. But then I'm saying, what is long distance? Long distance is for every user different. It depends on the range of the car. For a Smart, long distance is 150 kilometers. For a Tesla, long distance is maybe 500 kilometers. And especially the small cars need this option, because if you drive to your grandma that lives 150 kilometers away and you only have 100 kilometers of range, then you need this way more often. But especially the small cars don't have this option. And there's a disconnection, what the user wants and what the user needs. Because we were asking in the beginning the wrong people. We were asking users that are not electric vehicle users yet and that have not made this paradigm shift in their head yet. So if you ask them, they say, I need an electric vehicle with 800 kilometers of range and 5 minutes of charging time to be able to conveniently go anywhere. But what is the reality if we ask users that are driving good EVs with good route planning? You don't need that. An EV with 400 kilometers of range and this perfect charging stop planning is totally enough to have this complete freedom of travel. We can tackle this problem with two ways. The left side is the technology, the platform way that I showed earlier. We can have a better battery chemistry, bigger batteries, faster charging times, and more chargers. But all of this adds a lot of time and cost, R&D cost. But we can also make it with UIUX. With good UIUX, we can make this feeling of complete freedom of travel possible with today's technology already in the electric vehicles. And we need to put a way higher focus there, because the technology side is anyways going to happen. This is anyways going to improve. But you will have vehicles that cannot have a big battery, that have to be cheap produced, that are small vehicles, and for those, the UI/UX is even more important. To represent it a little bit more visually, I have here the 4 pillars of long-distance EV travel. To make it again clear, what's important in an electric vehicle to make long-distance travel possible. So one factor is the battery size. The bigger the battery, the more range you have, of course. The second factor is the charge speed. The faster you can charge, the faster this big battery will be full again, of course. Those two factors, by the way, multiply with each other. So if both are bad, it's going to be bad, but if both are good, it's going to be double good. But we have a third factor, which is consumption. So if you don't even consume that much in the first place, you don't have to recharge that much, and all those 3 factors multiply with each other. But all of those are technology-bound. But we have a fourth one, which is good UI/UX, which we can do in every single car, and that we can make up a lot of it. And again, all 4 of those factors, they multiply with each other. And now, imagine it's a small car, like a Smart or whatever. You will have a small battery, you will have slower charging speed, maybe the consumption is actually pretty good, but with good UI/UX you can make it up a lot. And this is what I want to put the emphasis today about in this talk, that we need to think more deeply about this topic and really put EV, like how it works currently, systems are designed for combustion engine vehicles and then converted for EVs, but it should be the other way around, because the combustion engine vehicle is actually way easier. And the conversion from EV to combustion engine from an interface point of view is easier. But currently it happens the other way around, and that's the problem. One quote from myself, that's my opinion. I think that an EV with 500 kilometers of range and bad software or bad charging planning is worse or the same than an EV with 300 kilometers of range and good software. And I have this with my own experience and with friends and so on. And it's really the most important thing is this charge stop planning, because it helps you so much and you don't have to plan everything with your smartphone. Coming back to all of those features. This is exactly where Luxoft comes in, because we do the benchmarking, the research, the user studies, in all of those different topics to design a system from the ground up, from a white piece of paper until production. So benchmarking, user studies, designing and building the system through different phases. And for this, we have UX, UI teams basically across the globe, everywhere, and working also together with OEMs in different countries. Because also this mentality, this paradigm shift, in some areas, China and so on, it already happened, or in Norway, nobody thinks about this anymore. But in other countries, you have to think a little bit different. And this has effects of the design of the system as well. Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's talk. I put a QR code on it because we can go in way more detail about this topic. So if you want to hit me up, you can do it either with a LinkedIn or if you want to meet me here at the booth at Luxoft or somewhere at the conference in the next 2 days, we can really go in depth in this topic. And now we still have some time for questions.
So, Thank you very much, Daniel. Any questions for Daniel? Feel free to come to the microphone. I have one as well. Thank you. I thought that was fascinating. I love the fact that persona definition now has boiled down to Apple users and Android users. I'm going to use that from now on. Thinking about those Android users, you talked a lot about the ability to change, to go under the hood and change things. Some of those kind of users, I think, they're often the ones, I might be one of these type of people, who quite enjoy sitting and planning my route at home and using my phone. So to what extent are you allowing people to do that on a smartphone or a laptop and then send it to the vehicle? Is that important?
I mean, that should be a feature as well, because it's actually a good thing if you can plan it from the sofa, this route, and send it there, but it should be not the only option, of course. So this is a really good point. And especially, let's make it clear, the nerds, they love to fiddle out with those things and with those settings and so on. And this is where I also say, for example, Tesla goes the Apple way. They just do it, you type it in, but you have no customization. You just have to go this route. And there's, especially for the nerds, they want to fiddle around with these things. They want to maybe use a different charger at a different place, and therefore you want this customization. But you should never, for the sake of it, confuse the other users, because most of them, they just don't care about it. So here, in this example that I shown, it was hidden behind a small little menu, and in the vehicle, the user should be also not overwhelmed with this setting in the end. No.
I agree.
But the definition between Apple and Android is, I think, very understandable for everyone. That's why.
Any other questions? No more questions for Daniel? One gentleman, fantastic. Please come to the microphone.
I'm guessing there's a question about trucks coming now, electric?
Not directly, but actually we tackled a few of those problems as we showed our urban e-truck. I think it was an IAA 2016 or something. And the most problems we tackled was actually not the UX or UI, but the available data to do the planning. Mm-hmm. So I think what is another pillar for this is to have the available data about availability of parking, of loading points, and if they are still available if I'm there. What's the traffic conditions, the weather conditions, and how that will affect our planning, and to hold it live.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. I had this discussion yesterday with on the icebreaker session with Drew from TomTom, and he told this to me already that what I presented here is a vision. In the real world, it's going to be a lot more difficult with all this data, but if you're working for OEM, you need to open this data for providers like Luxoft, TomTom, or whatever that need to work with this data to create this experience, because without the data, we cannot make this experience. And on top of that comes the charging data with the availability of these charging stations. This comes from outside. This is a little bit more difficult, but this data gets better and better every day. The sad part is that we, for example, have the Ionity charging network that's mostly built by German OEMs, but often it's not even in their own cars properly integrated where every single station with availability is there. So data is the base point. We need that, but for the talk, I'm assumed that we will have this data at some point. And Tesla is showing that it's possible, but of course they have their own charging station, which makes it easier.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions? I guess while we're waiting for more questions, I'll follow up on that. So in your view, personally or on behalf of Luxoft, Daniel, who do you think is responsible for bringing all of this data together? Because I think that is one of the key challenges. I was speaking to a couple of people last night. There's a gentleman who I think's in the room who I had a fascinating discussion with. He works for a transportation authority, and he has information which he wants to put into the dashboard for the canopies over motorways. When there are alerts on there. And he just can't get started because he doesn't know where to go to get that information into the driver experience. And I think this is one of the big challenges we face as an industry, is how to actually put all of this together. Who's going to take the lead? Should it be the OEM? Should it be companies like Luxoft? Should it be someone else?
In my opinion, everything comes together at the OEM, and the OEM should really have the responsibility, because most of the data the OEM already has, because many data we also need from the vehicle, like battery degradation, battery temperature. There's so many data points that we need to calculate a proper route, but they don't want to give out this data, especially to an Android system maybe or to an Apple system. But they need to open up with this data, because to create an awesome user experience with all those apps, for example, we need this data. But also the OEM doesn't have the control over all data, again, with the charging providers. But in the end, the OEM is responsible for the experience that the user has in the vehicle. So they should make sure that either if it's an external company like Luxoft or the OEM itself, whoever develops the system, that they have the data that they need. And again, the data luckily gets every single day better. We get more data points, we get more charging stations, live real-time availability, the option to reserve those charging spots and so on. So this will get better in the future, and countries are showing it already that it's possible today. So I'm not so worried about it, but we need to start. It's actually agreed. One more, I think.
Gentleman question there.
Saf Degani from General Motors. I have a question about the use of the system for the experience, because if you have to stop, you have to worry about food and rest stop, and if you have kids, it gets even more complicated. What are you thinking about how to make this an experience, given the fact that we're so limited with range?
That's exactly, with EVs, that's what I mean with the paradigm shift. Let's say you're traveling with your family and with the kids. The car plans something, but maybe your family thinks differently because a kid has to pee or you have to do something. That's where the system needs to be customizable enough, where you press a button and say, hey, someone needs to pee right now, you press a button, and it finds a spot where you can either pee or food or whatever it is, plus charging at the same time. Because you won't believe how much energy you get back into an electric vehicle during a toilet break, basically. With the family, this for sure takes 15 minutes. This is half the battery already there. And you not lose time because you have to do the stop anyways. Yep. And for this, the system needs to be smart enough, user-friendly enough to have those settings. And this is a really cool thing, because as I'm aware, there's no system on the market right now, no OEM, where you have this button and say, I want to go for a break now. Please plan now a charging stop with a food break or whatever. And that's why I had it as a setting option, because this is important for the future.
Well, I think we have reached our time, so thank you very much. Please give Daniel a huge round of applause. Thank you for the very interesting presentation.